Imagine giving birth, your body still aching, your heart clinging to the fragile cries of your newborn, only to have your mother-in-law slam the nursery door in your face. She holds your baby hostage, demanding you scrub floors and wash dishes while your stitches still bleed. This isn't just family drama. It's cruelty, and it nearly broke me. But what happened next changed everything.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's story is one of betrayal, survival, and the fight to protect what matters most, family. If you've ever dealt with toxic in-laws or felt cornered by someone who should have supported you, this will hit home. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, because stories like this remind us how strong we can be when love is tested.
My name is Leia, and if you've ever rolled your eyes at your mom trying to set you up on a date, then you already know how this story began. I wasn't exactly desperate for love, but at 28, working as a freelance graphic designer in the heart of Colorado, I had enough on my plate. My life was a steady grind of late nights designing logos, chasing clients for payments, and trying to keep my tiny apartment from falling apart. Romance? That felt like a luxury I didn't have the time or patience for. But as life often does, fate had a way of sneaking up on me in the most unexpected form. My mother. It was a crisp Colorado morning, the kind where the mountains stood tall like silent guardians, their snowy caps catching the light in a way that made you forget the chaos of everyday life. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee, staring at a half-finished project on my laptop, when my phone buzzed. It was my mom. She didn't usually call me in the morning unless it was something important. I picked up, half expecting her to remind me to pay a bill or ask if I'd eaten breakfast. Instead, her voice practically bubbled through the line. "Leia, you won't believe who I ran into at the coffee shop this morning." I sighed, sinking deeper into my chair. "Who, Mom?" "Marlene," she said, pausing for effect. "My old college roommate. We haven't seen each other in years. And guess what? We both realized our kids are still single. Her son Noah and you." I groaned so loud I'm sure she heard it across the line. "A setup? Really, Mom? I'm not in high school anymore."
"Oh, don't be so dramatic," she teased. "You're 28, Leia. You work too hard, you barely go out, and Noah's a good man. He's a history teacher, thoughtful, handsome. Trust me, you'll like him. Just give it a chance." I pinched the bridge of my nose. My mother had always been a hopeless romantic, still believing in love stories even after my father walked out on us when I was a child. She raised me on her own, working double shifts just to keep food on the table. And somewhere in the chaos of survival, she managed to cling to her faith in love. Maybe she wanted me to have the happy ending she never did. Still, the thought of walking into some awkward blind date didn't exactly thrill me, but the conviction in her voice made it hard to push back. So I agreed, reluctantly, already rehearsing excuses in case things went horribly wrong. A week later, I found myself at a cozy coffee shop in downtown Boulder. The place smelled of roasted beans and warm pastries. The kind of place where people lingered over their laptops or whispered across tables. I sat by the window, nervously stirring my latte until the foam dissolved into nothing. And then he walked in, Noah. He wasn't the kind of man who turned heads with movie star looks, but there was something about him that drew me in instantly. Warm brown eyes, the kind that made you feel seen, paired with a shy smile that seemed both uncertain and genuine. He was tall, with a slightly rumpled shirt that hinted he'd been in a rush, but instead of looking sloppy, it made him seem real, approachable. "Leia?" he asked, and I nodded. We both laughed nervously, sitting down like two kids caught in a prank. "So, our moms ambushed us," I said, breaking the ice. "Seems like it," he chuckled. Mine wouldn't stop talking about how this was bait. The awkwardness melted faster than I expected. We started talking, really talking. At first, it was small things, like work and hobbies. He told me about his job as a high school history teacher and how he loved making old battles and revolutions come alive for his students. I confessed how exhausting freelance life could be, how sometimes I questioned if chasing creative dreams was worth the stress. He didn't judge, he just listened, leaning forward, asking thoughtful questions, as if every word mattered. Before I knew it, hours had passed. We discovered we both loved hiking the Flatirons, blasting indie music on late-night drives, and greasy diner burgers that tasted better at midnight than they ever did at noon. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery shades of orange and pink, the barista had to gently remind us that the shop was closing. Walking out together, there was a spark in the air I couldn't ignore. Noah wasn't just polite or kind, he was present. He had this way of making me feel like I wasn't just talking, I was being heard. For someone like me who'd spent years trying to prove herself in a world that often dismissed freelancers as hobbyists, that meant everything. That first date turned into another, and then another. Weekly meetups became our ritual. Hikes up winding trails, concerts under the stars, late-night conversations over burgers and neon-lit diners. Each time, I found myself falling a little more. 2 months in, I couldn't hold it back any longer. One starry night, after a hike that left us both breathless and laughing, I turned to him and blurted out, "So, do you want to be my boyfriend or what?" He grinned, that shy smile lighting up the dark like fireworks. "Hell yeah, Laya!" Just like that, we were official. Our moms were over the moon, practically patting themselves on the back for their matchmaking genius. And for a while, everything felt like a dream. But even in those early days, when everything was new and perfect, I couldn't ignore the shadow that lingered at the edge of it all. Marlene. The first time I met her, she hugged me warmly enough, but her eyes told a different story. Sharp, calculating, as if she were sizing me up. My mom had warned me that Marlene had always been take charge, even back in college, and I chalked it up to her personality. She was a nurse after all, running her hospital ward like a drill sergeant. Maybe that explained her intensity, but deep down, something about her unsettled me, a gut feeling I tried to ignore. At the time, I didn't know it, but that feeling was the first warning sign, the first tremor before the earthquake. Because as much as I loved Noah, as much as he became the missing piece in my life, I had no idea how far Marlene's shadow would reach or how much damage it could cause. And that's where this story truly begins. At first, everything between Noah and me felt like it was straight out of one of those indie songs we used to blast in his old car. Raw, real, and full of heart. We weren't just dating, we were building something. A life that felt ours. Our weekends became sacred. Saturdays were for hiking trails near Boulder, pushing ourselves up rocky paths until the city below looked like a painting. Sundays we spent sprawled on the couch, tangled up in blankets, binging documentaries, or arguing playfully over which pizza place had the better crust. We dreamed big together, too. A family. A house with a porch where we could drink coffee while watching our kids play. I'd sketch nursery ideas in my notebook, and Noah would tell me stories of how he'd teach our children about history, how the past could shape their future. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was on the same page with someone. My dad had left when I was just a kid, and my mom raised me to be fiercely independent. I'd carried that independence like armor, convincing myself I didn't need anyone. But Noah felt different. He wasn't just a partner. He was the piece I didn't know I was missing. But love stories don't exist in isolation. Families come with the package. And in ours, the shadow of Marlene was always there. At first, she played the role of doting mother perfectly. She invited us over for dinner, setting her table with more food than the three of us could ever eat. Her famous pot roast, perfectly roasted vegetables, pies with flaky crusts that smelled like cinnamon and home. She smiled, she asked about my work, she told stories about Noah as a child that made us both laugh. But woven between the warmth were small, sharp threads.
"Still freelancing, Lokinya?" she'd ask one evening, her tone light but her eyes sharp. "Must be nice to set your own hours." Or another time, "Noah's always been so traditional. I hope you're keeping up with the house." Little comments, said with a smile, but carrying weight. At first, I laughed them off. Maybe she didn't mean them the way they sounded. Maybe she was just trying to make conversation. But those little jabs stuck to me like burrs.
Small but irritating, building into something I couldn't shake. I finally broke one evening when Noah and I were sprawled on our couch, takeout containers scattered around us. He was grading papers, red pen in hand, while I was sketching ideas for a new client logo. "Your mom's weird," I said, my voice hesitant. "She's nice sometimes, but other times I swear she's judging me, like I'm not good enough." He froze, pen hovering over the page. His face darkened, a storm gathering in his eyes. He adored his mother. She had raised him alone after his father passed when he was just a boy. To him, she was a hero, someone who had sacrificed everything to give him a chance. But he wasn't blind. He'd heard her tone, seen the way she looked at me sometimes. "She's got no right to make you feel small, Lakinya," he said firmly. Setting his pen down, he reached for my hand, his grip steady. "I'll talk to her." I didn't know what he said to her, but the next time we saw Marlene, she was back to her warm self, smiling, offering me extra servings of dinner, asking about my latest design projects as if she cared deeply about every detail. I breathed easier, thinking maybe I had misread her. Then came our wedding. It was a small, intimate affair. Exactly what we wanted. A friend's backyard strung with fairy lights, laughter in the air, the Colorado night wrapping us in its cool embrace. I wore a simple white dress, nothing fancy, but Noah looked at me as if I'd stepped out of a dream. When we exchanged vows, his hands trembled slightly, but his voice was steady. "Leia, you're my home, my heart, my forever." I couldn't stop smiling as I promised him the same. Marlene clapped the loudest when the officiant declared us husband and wife. Her face split into a proud grin. For a moment, I thought maybe all my worries had been silly. Maybe she had accepted me. Maybe things would be smooth now. But life has a way of testing even the strongest foundations. A few months after the wedding, disaster struck. A flash flood ripped through Marlene's apartment complex. The images on the news were terrifying. Cars half submerged, belongings floating in brown water, people wading through waist-deep currents. When Noah told me Marlene had lost everything, my stomach knotted. "She's got nowhere else to go," he said, his voice heavy with worry. "We have to take her in." Every instinct in me screamed no. Not because I didn't care, but because I knew, deep down, that this would change everything. Still, how could I say no? She was his mother. She had just lost her home. I wanted to be the kind of wife who stepped up, who didn't turn her back on family. So I nodded, of course. And just like that, Marlene moved into our spare room. At first, it wasn't terrible. She brought her boxes of knickknacks, her medical textbooks, little pieces of her life that filled up our home. She cooked dinners, sometimes insisting on doing all the cleaning. We'd sit in the living room and watch old movies, laughing at the cheesy lines. But even then, I felt it, the shift. Our home wasn't ours anymore. It was a house divided. The warning signs were small at first. She'd reorganized the kitchen without asking, moving pots and pans until I couldn't find anything. She'd comment on my routines, how I folded laundry, how I loaded the dishwasher, how I wasted time with design work when I could be doing real chores, always with that sharp edge, that undercurrent of disapproval. I told myself to be patient, to be kind, to give her grace. But patience has a limit, and when I found out I was pregnant, I didn't realize just how much that limit would be tested. The little plus sign appeared so fast I thought I'd imagined it. I stared, blinked, and stared again. The world narrowing to a thin white stick and two pink lines that seemed too small to hold a future. My hand shook. Then I laughed. One of those breathless, shocked laughs that doesn't sound like you, and pressed a palm to my stomach as if I could greet someone already there. Noah was in the kitchen making coffee. I walked out holding the test like a secret that couldn't wait another second. He turned, saw my face, and the mug slipped from his hand, shattering on the tile. "Are you?" I nodded. His eyes filled in an instant. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and lifted me like I weighed nothing, spinning once before he remembered we had neighbors and set me down, whispering, "We're going to be parents!" We told our moms that evening over a video call. My mom cried happy tears, promising to fly out for the birth, Marlene smiled so wide her cheeks dimpled. "My first grandbaby," she said, hand to chest. "We'll do this the right way." The words were warm, the emphasis was not. I heard the capital letters in right. Morning sickness arrived like a storm that forgot how to leave. It wasn't just mornings, it was a constant tide. Salt and acid and exhaustion. A hunger I couldn't feed, and a nausea I couldn't outrun. Some days, brushing my teeth made me gag. Some days, just standing felt like lifting a car. At first, Marlene seemed to understand. She brought me ginger tea and crackers, stood at the stove stirring soup, shooed me toward the couch with a brisk rest. But the patience thinned as quickly as broth in a too big pot. The questions started, then the comments, then the orders dressed up as concern. "Are you still in pajamas?" she asked one afternoon, glancing at the clock as if it could shame me into standing straighter. "Routine is important during pregnancy." Another day, she held up a basket of laundry like evidence. "If you fold as you go, it won't pile up." And on a Saturday, when the smell of cleaning products made me run for the bathroom, she stood in the doorway and said, "When I was pregnant with Noah, I worked all 3 trimesters. Didn't miss a shift." I wanted to say, "That was your body. This is mine." I wanted to say, "I am not a checklist you run on your ward." I wanted to say, "Please be kind." Instead, I whispered, "I'm trying," and swallowed the rest. Noah tried to be everywhere at once, teacher by day, husband and son by night. He carried groceries, massaged my calves when they cramped, read articles at 2 a.m. about vitamins and sleep positions. He reassured me when I cried for no reason, and when I cried for all the reasons. He couldn't be home all the time, though, and the hours he was gone stretched long and thin. That's when the lists started appearing. At first, it was a post-it, dishes. Then a half sheet ripped from a notepad, counters, bathroom sink, sweep entryway. It grew into a full page clipped to a magnet on the fridge. Pantry reorganization, vacuum, fold towels by size. Tasks were checked in red ink when I finished, circled when I didn't. I told myself I was imagining the way the circles felt like failure. When I found the list titled Standards, I finally said something. "Marlene," I began, holding the paper between 2 fingers. "I know the house matters. So does my body. I'm doing what I can." She didn't look up from the onions she was slicing. "And I'm doing what I can, which is keep this place from falling apart. We're bringing a baby into this home. Order matters." Her knife thudded evenly against the cutting board. I watched her hands work, fast, precise, merciless. "I hear you," I said, fighting to keep my voice soft. "But the lists make me feel like I'm failing." She set the knife down and met my eyes. "Then stop failing." The words landed like a slap I wasn't allowed to react to. I took the trash out and cried by the bins where the air smelt like orange peels and damp cardboard. That night, I told Noah. He set his jaw. The muscle ticking in a way I had learned meant he was choosing words carefully to control the anger underneath. "I'll talk to her," he said. He did. I didn't hear all of it, but I heard enough. His low, steady voice, her clipped responses, his sharper, "This is not your ward, Mom." Her wounded, "I'm trying to help." After she was sugar for 3 whole days. She brought me watermelon in a cold bowl. She asked about my client calls. She told me I looked glowy. I almost believed the storm had passed. Then the 4th day came. I woke nauseous and stayed that way. A queasy pendulum swinging between couch and bathroom. By late afternoon, my lower back ached like an old bruise. I texted Noah, "Rough day, can you pick up dinner?" and curled on my side with a pillow between my knees like every article suggested. I must have slept. I woke to Marlene's voice, low but sharp, as if she'd opened a drawer and found something missing. "Leia," she called from the hallway. "Laundry's sitting in the washer. It will sour." "I'll move it," I called back, pushing myself upright. The room spun. I closed my eyes and waited for the world to stop tilting. She appeared in the doorway, arms folded. "And the kitchen. I prepped dinner. You can finish it." I asked Noah to pick something up. "I'm not feeling great." Marlene sniffed. "You look well enough to be on your phone." The shame rose so fast it was almost heat. I placed the phone face down on the coffee table. "I'm trying," I said again, hating how small the words sounded. "Trying isn't doing," she replied. "You have to toughen up. Babies don't care about your feelings." It was the condescension as much as the sentence, the way she'd narrowed me down to delicate and dramatic and deficient. Something inside me snapped a thread I'd been stretching too tight for too long. "I am tough," I said, my voice shaking. "You don't get to decide that for me." Her eyes flashed, the briefest flare. "Don't raise your voice in my presence. This is my house," I said, and felt the room change temperature. The silence stretched. I stood, slowly, because any fast movement made the floor wave. "I'll move the laundry," I said. "Then I need to lie back down." She followed me down the hall as if proximity could keep me obedient. In the laundry room, I bent, lightheaded, and hauled wet clothes into the dryer, each handful heavier than it should have been. My lower back screamed. When I straightened, the room pulsed once and steadied. Marlene stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her hand cream, something floral and clinical at the same time. "You're not ready," she said quietly, "for this. For a baby. You can barely manage a home." I wanted to say 1,000 things, that homes are more than checklists, that love is not a chore chart, that readiness is a lie women are told to keep them afraid. What came out was simpler and truer. "I'm doing my best, and I need you to stop making that feel like not enough." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I am protecting my son. I am his wife," I said, surprised by the steel in my mouth. "This is our family. Mine too." Something in her face hardened, then rearranged itself into a pleasant mask. "Of course," she said, "then act like it." She turned on her heel and left me with the hum of machines and the thud of my own heart. I moved through the rest of the afternoon like a swimmer in too cold water. The lists, the kitchen, the way she watched me cross a room as if she could grade the effort. When the sun slid behind the mountains and the living room fell into that soft blue hour, I collapsed onto the couch with a heating pad and let tears slip into my hairline where no one could see. The front door clicked. Keys on the little ceramic dish. Noah's voice calling, bright and warm. "Hey, I brought Ty." Then he stepped into the living room, took one look at my face, and set the bags down carefully, as if any sudden movement might break me. What happened? Before I could answer, Marlene answered for me, entering from the hall with that same pleasant mask. "We've had a busy day. Leah needed a little push to get things done." Noah's eyes cut from her to me. He crossed to the couch and crouched, bringing his face level with mine. "You okay?" I opened my mouth and closed it. My throat felt tight, my chest tighter. I nodded, because nodding was easier than speaking, and because I didn't want to start crying again. He didn't look convinced. He reached for my hand. It was cold. His was not. Marlene's voice floated from behind him. "She needs structure, not sympathy." Noah stood, slow, as if every inch mattered. He turned to face his mother. The air in the room condensed to a point. He wasn't loud when he spoke. That was somehow worse. "What did you say to my wife?" Marlene blinked, feigning confusion so clean it glinted. "I told her the truth." "And what truth is that?" he asked. "That she is not ready." Each word precise, delivered like a diagnosis. Something passed over Noah's face. Grief, maybe? Or the end of an illusion. "Don't ever say that to her again," he said. "Not in this house." Her chin lifted. "I'm trying to help you." He took a breath that sounded like a door closing, then listened to me. The dryer buzzed somewhere down the hall like a distant alarm. I sat very still, watching two people who loved the same person try to claim authority over what that love meant. Marlene folded her arms. "If you want a strong family, you don't coddle weakness." Noah didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Strength isn't cruelty. And this, he gestured at the room, at me, is not your command. The house held its breath. For a second, I thought she might apologize or soften or retreat. Instead, she smiled a tight, polite smile that meant nothing good and said, "Understood." By the third trimester, my body felt like a coastline after storms, altered, tender, and constantly recalculating where the shore began. Breathing took negotiation. Sleep came in fragments. I moved like a careful promise. The doctor called it normal discomfort. It didn't feel normal. It felt like carrying the sky. That afternoon,
The light through the blinds was a thin gold ribbon. I'd managed to eat half a bowl of oatmeal and answer a few client emails before the nausea doubled back and the ache in my hips decided to speak in a language made of static. I curled on the couch with a pillow between my knees, counting Sophie's kicks like stars. 1, 2, 3, and drifted in that shaky half-sleep pregnant women know too well. The thud of a cabinet snapped me awake. Marlene stood in the doorway, holding a spray bottle and a blue microfiber cloth like a badge. Her expression was tidy. Her voice was not. "The kitchen," she said, as if announcing weather. "It needs attention." I pushed myself upright. The room tilted. Corrected. "I'll do it later. I just need—" "Later," she repeated, tasting the word and finding it spoiled. "There are dishes in the sink, countertops sticky, the bathroom mirror streaked. Babies need order." "So do mothers," I said softly, trying to rub the grit from my eyes. "I'm in pain." She stepped closer, and the citrus cleaner smell flooded the room. "Pain is not an excuse," she said. "I worked 12-hour shifts with Noah, on my feet. I didn't allow myself to fall apart." The sentence lodged under my ribs. I wanted to answer with 100 truths. That pain is not a competition, that motherhood isn't a sport where you win by ignoring yourself, that help is not the same as weakness. All I managed was, "I'm not falling apart. I'm listening to my body." Her mouth curved in a neat, professional smile. "Listen faster." Something in me flared, then guttered. I stood, slowly, because speed had become my enemy, and shuffled to the kitchen. The sink was full of plates with marinade halos. I turned on the faucet. The water railed against stainless steel. My lower back complained in a language older than reason. Behind me, Marlene's commentary kept pace with the drip. "Rinse first, hotter water, you're leaving streaks." I set a plate down harder than I meant to. Ceramic clinked, my hands trembled. "If you don't like how I do it," I said without turning, "you can leave." Silence fell like a glass dropped on carpet, somehow noiseless and still violent. Then she laughed. "This is my son's house. It's our house," I said, and felt the words take root. The room swam. I gripped the counter and breathed through it, counting 4 in, 6 out, the way the nurse had shown me at childbirth class. The contraction wasn't real. It was a band of muscle staging a protest. Still, my eyes watered. The sponge sagged from my fingers. "Bathroom next," Marlene said, as if she hadn't noticed the rebellion in my body. "And laundry. It's piling." "I can't," I said, finally, fully, "not right now." The change in her was subtle and total. Her face smoothed into something clinical. "Can't or won't." "Can't," I said, and hated that it sounded like pleading. She stepped into my space, lowered her voice. "You think the baby waits? The house waits? You're too soft, Lavea. You expect to be carried. By whom? By Noah? By me? By anyone who feels sorry for you?" She tilted her head. "That's not how a family survives. And cruelty is?" We stood like that, inches apart, 2 women holding different maps of the same house. My heart beat hard in my throat. A pulse hummed beneath my skin. Across the room, the front door lock turned. That small mechanical sound, the metal throat clearing of a key meeting a home, was a lifesaver tossed into rough water. Noah's keys always jingled like tiny wind chimes. I told him once I could find him by sound alone. Now, the jingle, the hinge sigh, the soft thump of the door closing, they were a lifeline. "Hey," he called from the entry, bright and unguarded. "I grabbed sandwiches. Surprise!" He stepped into the kitchen, set the paper bag on the counter, took in our faces. His smile fell in one clean piece. He didn't touch me first. He looked. Noah always looked. His gaze skimmed my pallor, the tension in my shoulders, the way my hand still clutched the edge of the counter. Then he turned to his mother. "What happened?" Marlene answered before I could, her tone switching to gentle authority, the performance she wore like a favorite coat. "Nothing happened. We're just keeping the house in shape. Lavea needs structure." "Structure," Noah repeated. His voice was quiet, the kind of quiet that suggests thunder has decided to whisper. I heard myself say it, a small sound that took all my courage. She wants me to scrub the bathroom now. He looked at me, then at the sponge, then back at me. The calculation was quick and final. He moved to my side, gently took the sponge from my hand, and set it in the sink as if removing a weapon from a crime scene. Then he turned fully to Marlene. This stops now. 3 words. A house-sized shift. Marlene's jaw set. I'm not the villain here. I am trying to help you both. Babies need clean homes. Wives need discipline. Noah's breath hitched. For a moment, I saw a boy who'd learned to make himself small in the face of authority, who'd grown into a man determined not to repeat that size. When he spoke again, it was measured. Wives need respect. Leia needs rest. The baby needs a calm mother. And I need you to hear me. He stepped forward. This is our home, not your ward, not your project. If you can't live here without policing Leia's body and our marriage, you can't live here. She blinked as if he'd opened a window and the wind had the audacity to exist. You're throwing me out? I'm drawing a line, he said. If you step over it again, yes. She looked at me, not him, and something colder than winter rose in her eyes. So this is what you wanted. I shook my head. I want peace. I want our daughter to come into a house that doesn't grade her mother. Marlene's laugh was small and cutting. You've turned him against me. Noah's reply was a soft blade. No one turned me. I walked. He lifted the bag of sandwiches and slid one toward me, the ordinary gesture a benediction. Eat, he said, softer now. Then lie down. I'll run a bath. We'll call your mom. For a heartbeat, I almost apologized. Old habits, old survival skills. But I swallowed the reflex. I took the sandwich, my hands shook. He noticed and steadied them with his own. Marlene stood very still, a statue deciding whether to be marble or a woman. When she spoke, her voice was flat. I lost my home in a flood. I did not expect to lose my son in a kitchen. You didn't, Noah said. You lost my compliance. That's different. Silence again. This time it had an edge. She turned away, moved down the hall with a practiced dignity, and closed her bedroom door. Not a slam, a verdict. The sound traveled through the house like a fault line. We ate at the counter, the way we had before the flood, and the lists and the rearranged drawers. The sandwich tasted like relief and exhaustion. Noah asked where it hurt. Everywhere, I said, and he smiled a broken little smile that said, I know. He ran the bath. Warm water turned the porcelain into a small mercy. He sat on the tile and read lesson plans aloud in a soothing monotone while I soaked, laughing once when he stumbled over mercantilism, a word he could teach in his sleep. The room smelled like lavender and steam and the rubber duck he'd bought as a joke. I cried without making sound. He handed me a towel without comment. That night we lay in bed, the house creaking around us, and listened to the clock. I meant it, he said into the dark. One more line crossed, and she's gone. I know, I whispered. I'm sorry it has to be you who says it. It has to be me. She's my mother. You shouldn't have to carry this and a baby. Carry this and a baby. The sentence looped in my head after his breathing deepened. Marlene's door stayed closed. Somewhere, water clanked in the pipes. Sophie pressed a heel against my palm as if signing her name. The next morning, Marlene was sugar again. Tea, toast. How are you feeling? Her voice was gauze, but underneath I heard the rip. I heard it in the way she wiped the counter twice, in the way she folded the dish towel with soldier corners, in the way her eyes flicked to the sponge, then to me, as if memorizing a map to a future argument. For a week, the house pretended. She was pleasant. We were careful. The air was glass. People say the calm before a storm is a gift. It isn't. It's a warning with pretty lighting. Because the key that saved me that afternoon, the jingle, the turn, the hinge sigh, would not always arrive in time. And when the door that mattered most finally closed, it wouldn't be the front door at all. It would be hers. The latch clicked. The door creaked open just enough for Noah to see inside. Sophie's cries spilled out first, desperate and raw.
Then her little pink face came into view. She was red from the effort of crying. Tiny fists clenched, legs kicking against the blanket Marlene had tucked too tightly. Noah's voice was low, but it carried the weight of thunder. "What are you doing?" Marlene's face didn't flinch. She smoothed the edge of the blanket, as if the problem was fussiness, not cruelty. "I was teaching her responsibility," she said calmly, tilting her head toward me in the hall. "She has to understand what's required of her as a wife and a mother. By locking our newborn in a room?" His voice rose an octave, disbelief lacing through every word. "She exaggerates," Marlene said smoothly, eyes darting past him toward me. "Laya is fragile. She cries. She makes up stories. I was protecting Sophie from the chaos." My breath caught, my fingers digging into the couch cushion. No, Noah, He didn't need me to finish. His eyes had already hardened into something I'd never seen before. Not just anger, but betrayal. The kind of pain that comes from seeing someone you trusted reveal their true face. "You think I don't know my wife? You think I haven't seen her fight through every ache, every sickness, every sleepless night to protect this child? You think she would lie about this?" Marlene opened her mouth, but he cut her off, his voice sharp and final. "You don't get to talk anymore." He walked past her, lifted Sophie gently from the bassinet, and held her close. Her cries softened immediately, her tiny fists unclenching as his warmth surrounded her. He kissed her forehead, whispering, "I've got you, baby girl. You're safe." Then he turned, facing his mother fully. "This stops now," he said, his tone low but brimming with fury. "If you can't respect my wife, if you can't love her as part of this family, then you are no longer welcome here." Marlene's face faltered, her mask cracking for the first time. "Noah, you don't mean that. I raised you. I gave you everything. And now she's turning you against me." Noah took a step closer, Sophie tucked safely against his chest. "No one turned me. You did this yourself. You had chance after chance to be kind, to support us. Instead, you chose control. You chose cruelty. And now, you face the consequences." Her composure broke then. Her voice wavered, but the venom remained. "You'll regret this. Families don't survive when wives drive wedges between mothers and sons." Noah's response was quiet but lethal. "Families don't survive when mothers try to tear apart marriages. Pack your things. You're out." The words hung heavy in the air. I stood in the hallway, gripping the wall for support, heart pounding so hard I thought it might break my ribs. Sophie was in Noah's arms, safe. I could breathe again. Marlene's eyes darted to me, cold and sharp, as if to say, "This isn't over." Then she turned and walked into her room, closing the door behind her with a click that sounded more like defeat than retreat. Noah carried Sophie to me, his eyes softening when he saw my tears. He placed her in my arms, and the moment her tiny weight settled against me, my body unclenched. I kissed her head, inhaling the sweet newborn scent that grounded me. Noah crouched beside us, his hand on my knee. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have protected you sooner." I shook my head, cradling Sophie tighter. "You did. You're here now. That's all that matters." He pulled us both into his arms, wrapping us in a cocoon of warmth and resolve. For the first time in weeks, I felt like the house belonged to us again, not to Marlene, not to her rules, not to her cruelty, just us. But even as I clung to that moment, I knew this wasn't the end. Marlene's door had closed, but the storm inside her hadn't passed. And when it returned, it would come harder. The difference now was that Noah and I were no longer standing apart. We were united, side by side, ready to fight for our family. And Marlene, whether she admitted it or not, had just lost the power she thought she owned. Morning came thin and colorless, the kind of light that hesitates before committing to the day. The house was quiet in that particular way new parents pray for. Sophie breathing in small waves against my chest, Noah asleep on his side with one hand draped protectively over both of us, as if he could anchor our little island by touch alone. A cupboard door clicked down the hall. I felt Noah wake without moving. He's always been able to read a room before his feet hit the floor. He kissed the curve of Sophie's head, then my temple, then sat up with a careful exhale that sounded like someone stepping over a fault line. "I'll make coffee," he whispered, "and then I'll talk to her." I wanted to say I could handle it. I wanted to say I didn't need him to. But the truth was simpler. I did. Not because I was weak, but because I was finally done wearing a brave face like armor that never fit. "Okay," I said, and the word felt like a surrender to something wiser. In the kitchen, the coffee machine gurgled out a rhythm, a small domestic drummer beating time. Marlene stood at the counter in a pressed blouse like she was reporting for duty. She'd arranged a neat row of bottles, labels facing forward, and a stack of folded dish towels with edges aligned like parade ground corners. If last night had rattled her, the mask had already been sanded smooth. "Morning," Noah said, voice even. He poured coffee into 2 mugs and slid one toward her. She didn't touch it. "I've been up reorganizing." She indicated the cupboards. "Efficiency saves time. With the baby." "No," he said gently. "We aren't doing notes this morning." Her mouth thinned. "I thought we agreed on standards." "We agreed on respect," he said. "We agreed this is our home." Marlene's eyes flicked past him to the living room, where I swayed with Sophie. When she looked back at Noah, something older than last night lived in her stare. "You're throwing away decades of discipline for a woman who cries at a sponge." Noah's jaw tensed once, then unclenched. "I'm choosing my wife and my daughter, and I'm choosing myself." He set his mug down, the quietest punctuation. "You have today to pack. I'll drive you to a hotel this evening. We'll help you find something longer term tomorrow." Marlene laughed, a small, bright sound with cut glass inside it. "You'll regret this. She'll isolate you. That's what women like her do." Noah didn't blink. "Women like her?" he asked. So soft, the question stung. "Women who gave birth? 3 days ago? Women who ask for kindness?" He shook his head. "No. What I'll regret is if I let this continue. You can stay in our lives, but not in this house. Not like this." She stared at him as if waiting for the punchline. When it didn't arrive, she reached for the only tool that had ever worked on him: history. "I did everything alone after your father died. I held 2 jobs. I never cried. I never asked for help. And I'm grateful," he said. "And the gratitude was real and heavy. But I won't build my family on your exhaustion. I refuse to confuse pain with love." For a beat, the kitchen filled with all the things none of us had the vocabulary to say. The years she spent frightened and tireless, the years he spent learning to earn affection by being perfect, the years I spent watching my mother survive without tenderness and promising myself I'd ask for it when it mattered. Then Marlene tipped her chin and said with brittle grace, "If that's how it is, then I'll give you your space." Noah nodded once, "Thank you." She turned and left the room with her back unbent. Pride is a spine even when the body is tired. When the bedroom door clicked, Noah came to the couch and knelt. He didn't speak. He just laid his hand on Sophie's back, tiny breaths rising beneath his palm. It was the most honest prayer I've ever seen. "Are you sure?" I asked. His eyes met mine. "I'm sure. Last night wasn't a fight. It was a diagnosis." We moved like careful people through the rest of the morning. Noah texted his department chair that he'd be out for the day. I nursed Sophie and tried not to listen to the muted movements down the hall, the opening and closing of drawers, the hush of a closet door, the rustle of clothing that had lived in our house for months and was suddenly being evicted. Guilt brushed my shoulder like a moth, insistent and pointless. I let it land and did not swat it. Maybe I was finally learning I didn't have to fight every feeling to survive it. At noon, my phone buzzed. It was my mom. "Honey," she said, and the way she said it made me cry before I spoke. I told her everything, beginning with the door and ending with this morning's line in the sand. She didn't say, "I told you so." She didn't say, "Be careful," like fear disguised as love. She just said, "I'm proud of you." And then, "I'm booking a flight." And then, "Do you want me to talk to Noah?" Because she has always known that support isn't just a promise. It's an action. After I hung up, I noticed the baby monitor on the bookshelf blinking its small, indifferent eye. It was the cheaper one we used in the living room. The real system, Noah's paranoid teacher project, as he called it, was the 2 baby cameras he'd installed in the nursery and hallway before we brought Sophie home. He'd set them up for safety after a dozen what-ifs kept him awake one night. What if he fell asleep while holding the baby? What if a space heater we didn't own spontaneously combusted? What if a woman we loved forgot the difference between help and harm? Do they record? I asked. Local card, looping. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to feel watched. I wanted us to feel safer. He paused. I can pull them up. I didn't know if I wanted to see. Last night lived behind my eyes already. Marlene's calm face, the hush of the latch, Sophie's cry braided into the tile grout. But truth can be a kind of mercy, even when you hate its shape. Okay, I said. He opened the app, scrolled, scrubbed backward and forward through reels of quiet hallway and still nursery. At 2:14 p.m., the screen filled with the sight of a closed door. At 2:15, 2:16, my hand knocking, my mouth forming, please, the door opening an inch, Marlene's face framed by a strip of wood like she'd posed for a portrait called Gatekeeper. We watched it all without sound. The lack of audio made the images crueler. He scrubbed again, forward this time, and there it was, me at the sink, the quiver of my shoulders, the slow pace of the vacuum lines, the bathroom tiles consuming my knees. Noah set the phone down like it weighed more than a phone. He said, "It's enough, more than enough." Enough for what? I asked, though I already knew. For me to stop wondering if I'm overreacting, he said. For me to protect you with more than hope. We ate sandwiches standing up, as if sitting would invite doubt. I could feel the house exhale and hold. Exhale and hold. The way a body breathes through pain. Sophie slept on my chest, the only person here whose heart didn't yet understand geography. By late afternoon, Marlene had lined 2 suitcases by the door, along with a banker's box of framed photos and a grocery bag full of toiletries. She wore a blazer like a shield. Her makeup was immaculate. She looked like a woman leaving a job she outgrown, not a woman being asked to leave a home she'd tried to conquer. Noah picked up a suitcase. I'll load the car. She watched him, then looked at me. Her eyes were strangely calm. You got what you wanted, she said. I wanted safety, I said. I still do. Safety, she repeated, the word sour in her mouth. From a grandmother who cooks and cleans and keeps order? From a woman who took my child and closed a door, I answered. Those are not the same. Something flickered across her face. Offense, quickly disguised as pity. You'll learn, she said. Motherhood isn't for the fragile. I'm not fragile, I said. I'm healing. That's different. She considered me for a heartbeat, the way a surgeon might consider a patient who refuses a risky procedure. Then she nodded once, as if granting me the might to be wrong, and turned away. The drive to the hotel was short and long at the same time. Noah didn't make small talk. He didn't fill the silence with explanations he didn't owe. He carried her bags to the curb, spoke to the clerk with the calm of a man doing an ordinary thing on an extraordinary day, and handed Marlene the keycard without flourish. If you need anything practical, he said, text me. I'll help with logistics. But don't come by the house. Not without permission. He swallowed. We need space to heal. Marlene pressed her lips into that elegant line she wore instead of emotion. Space, she said, as if tasting a medicine she disliked. Yes. I suppose you do. On the ride home, Noah drove with both hands at 10 and 2, like he teaches his students, a muscle memory of responsibility. I watched the mountains grow out of the horizon and tried to reconcile how anything could be this beautiful while our small world was still bruised. We returned to an echo. No footsteps in the hall but ours, no extra coffee cup drying by the sink, no second pair of eyes measuring my movements. I should have felt relief. I did. I should also have felt grief. I did. Both fit in my chest at once, which surprised me less than it should have. 2 truths can live together without canceling each other out. That's adulthood's worst-kept secret. That night, after Sophie finally surrendered to sleep and the house mapped itself in low lamplight, Noah opened the laptop and slid in the camera card. We should back this up, he said. In case she says it didn't happen, I finished. He nodded. He clicked. A folder bloomed on the desktop with the date's date. He named it with something practical, like hallway nursery clips, because sometimes bureaucracy is how you keep from crying. We watched one snippet, then another, not to torture ourselves, to bear witness, to make meaning from what a lens had seen so we could stop arguing with our own eyes. When the final clip ended, Noah closed the laptop and rested his forehead against its cool shell. Then he looked at me with a steadiness that felt like we were standing on bedrock. Leia, after you've slept and after you've eaten and after you've told me you're ready, I'm going to call an attorney. My throat tightened. A lawsuit against your mom? Against what she did. Against what she might do if we pretend it was just a bad night. I can love her and still protect us. Those are not the same. They're the only way this works. I traced a fingertip along the arc of Sophie's cheek. Okay, I said, and the word didn't feel like surrender this time. It felt like choosing a future. Tomorrow, he said. We'll start tomorrow. We turned off the lamp. Darkness folded around us, not menacing now, but heavy in a kind way, like a blanket warmed by a radiator. Somewhere beyond the windows, the mountains held their shape without asking our permission. Sophie sighed in sleep, a sound like the end of a storm. And somewhere in a hotel a few miles away, a woman stared at the ceiling and mistook consequences for betrayal. Morning would come with phone calls and forms and words like evidence, affidavit, and endangerment. But that was tomorrow's work. Tonight, the house was ours again. And even in the quiet, I could hear it. Something like strength, rooting through the studs, choosing us back. The next morning dawned silver, the kind of light that slips through blinds like it's reluctant to enter. Sophie woke every 2 hours through the night, and though my body ached in places I didn't know could ache, I felt steadier. Maybe it was because the house was ours again. Maybe it was because Noah had drawn a line I couldn't unsee. Or maybe it was just the way Sophie's tiny fingers curled around mine, reminding me that love was the only anchor that mattered. Noah brewed coffee, moving around the kitchen in quiet efficiency. His shoulders were tense, jaw tight, the posture of someone already bracing for battle. He placed a mug in front of me, then sat across the table, laptop open. Leia, he said gently, we have to decide. We have the footage, we have your word, my word. We can file a police report. Or we can pretend last night was the last time. My stomach twisted. Pretending would be easier. Less paperwork, less confrontation, less pain. But easier didn't mean safer. Not for Sophie. Not for me. I thought about that door, about Marlene's calm face as my baby screamed. The memory alone was enough to answer. We can't pretend. If we let it go, she'll think it's allowed. And if she ever does it again, my voice broke. I can't risk that. Noah reached across the table, covering my hand with his. Then we call an attorney. He'd already researched. Of course he had. His phone buzzed with the contact info of a family law attorney a colleague had recommended. He dialed before I could talk myself into hesitation. His voice was calm, factual, professional, like he was speaking at a parent-teacher conference instead of outlining his own mother's betrayal. Within an hour, we were sitting in a law office that smelled of leather and printer ink. Sophie slept in her car seat beside me, her tiny breaths a metronome against the lawyer's crisp explanations. You have grounds, the attorney said, adjusting her glasses. What your mother-in-law did constitutes child endangerment and harassment. With video evidence, it's not a he said, she said. It's clear. Clear enough for court? Noah asked. Clear enough for charges. And you can file for a restraining order to keep her from approaching the house. The words made my chest tighten. Restraining order, charges, jail. These weren't abstract terms anymore. They were the vocabulary of our survival. I glanced at Sophie, her tiny fist rising and falling with each breath. She looked peaceful, untouched by the storm swirling around her. I wanted to keep it that way. We'll do it, I said, surprising myself with the strength in my voice. File the report. Protect our daughter. The attorney nodded, sliding a stack of papers across the desk. You're making the right choice.
That afternoon, a police officer arrived at our home to take our statements. Sophie cried as I recounted what happened, as if she could sense the tension in my voice. I told him about the lists, the door, the threats. My throat tightened when I described the moment Marlene said, "The longer you argue, the longer she cries." The officer's expression hardened. That's not discipline. That's cruelty. Noah handed him the USB drive with the footage. The officer glanced at it, then at us. This will help. It's undeniable. The next day, Marlene called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity and fear pushed me to swipe the screen. "How could you?" she hissed before I could speak. "Police at my door? Do you want to ruin me?" "You ruined yourself," I said quietly. "You locked my baby away and tried to break me. I won't let you near us again." Her breath caught, a ragged sound. "I'm your family." "No, you were Noah's mother. You chose to stop being mine." She hung up. Noah wrapped his arms around me as I cried into his chest. Sophie nestled between us. "You did the right thing, Marlene. We're building something she can't destroy." The court date came fast,
We sat in a small wood-paneled room that smelled faintly of dust and authority. Marlene sat across the aisle, her once proud posture diminished by the weight of her choices. When the footage played, me begging, Sophie crying, Marlene's face cold and composed, her mask cracked. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. The judge's voice was stern, unforgiving. This was reckless. This endangered a newborn. This was not discipline. It was cruelty. The gavel came down with finality. 6 months in jail, a fine, mandatory counseling. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt a strange mix of grief and relief. Grief for the family I'd hoped we could build. Relief that Sophie was safe. Both coexisted in my chest, fighting but not canceling each other out. Noah squeezed my hand, his thumb brushing across my knuckles. "It's over," he said, but I knew better. It wasn't over. It was the beginning of something new. Something harder, maybe, but also stronger, because from that day forward, our home wasn't just a place. It was a fortress, a promise, and for the first time, I believed we could keep it.
The first week after the court ruling was the strangest of my life. The house was still the same, nursery walls painted butter yellow, dishes stacked neatly in the cabinet, the faint hum of the baby monitor echoing through quiet nights, but the air felt different. Lighter, not because we celebrated Marlene's sentence, how could we, but because the shadow she had cast over our home was finally gone. Still, absence is not the same as peace. Noah moved carefully through the days, carrying Sophie as if she were made of spun glass, kissing her forehead every time he passed. At night, I'd catch him staring at her while she slept, his eyes both tender and heavy. He had been strong for me, for us, but I could see the fracture lines underneath. The guilt of turning his mother over to a system that didn't care about history, sacrifice, or context. One evening, as I rocked Sophie in the nursery, Noah sat on the floor with his back against the wall, speaking softly into the quiet. I keep remembering her working double shifts, the way she'd fall asleep sitting up at the kitchen table with medical charts spread everywhere. I used to think she was invincible. Now all I see is he trailed off, unable to finish. A woman who chose control over kindness. I whispered, "And you chose us. That's the difference." He nodded, but the sadness in his eyes didn't leave. A week later, the first letter arrived. The envelope was plain, the handwriting sharp and deliberate. Noah tugged it over in his hands for a long time before opening it. We sat at the kitchen table, Sophie asleep in her bassinet beside us, while he unfolded the lined paper. "Dear Noah," it began, "I don't expect forgiveness. I only want you to understand. I lost your father when you were so young. I had nothing but structure to keep me standing. Discipline was the only way I knew how to love. I thought if I demanded enough, pushed enough, you'd never fall apart like I did. I see now that I went too far. I don't blame Leah for hating me, but I hope one day you'll remember that everything I did, I thought I was doing for you." It was signed simply, Mom. Noah set the letter down, his jaw clenched. "She still doesn't get it," he said. "She still thinks it was about discipline, not cruelty, not control." I reached across the table, covering his hand with mine. "She may never get it, and that's not our job anymore. Our job is Sophie." He nodded, but I could see the war waging inside him. Loyalty to the woman who raised him versus loyalty to the family we were building. The letters kept coming. Every week, a new envelope appeared in the mailbox. Some were filled with apologies that sounded almost sincere. Others read like sermons, still insisting that she had been right, that we were too soft, that the world would eat us alive without her kind of strength. I read them once, then tucked them into a shoebox on the closet shelf, not to keep them as mementos, but as evidence of a truth we couldn't ignore. Marlene wasn't healed, not yet, maybe not ever. One night, Noah asked if I thought we should respond. "Not now," I said. "We're still bleeding. You don't write letters when the wound is open." He exhaled slowly, staring at Sophie in her crib. "She deserves better than this family mess." I replied, "She deserves honesty and protection and love. We can give her all of that. That's enough." Despite the heaviness, life kept moving. Sophie grew stronger every day. Her cries louder, her grip firmer, her eyes tracking the mobile above her crib. Friends dropped by with casseroles and laughter. My mom flew in and filled the house with warmth.
and neighbors stopped to coo over the baby during stroller walks. For the first time in months, our house became what it was meant to be, a home, not a battlefield, not a ward, a place where Sophie's giggles would one day echo off the walls, where Noah's lesson plans would pile on the kitchen counter, where I could design logos without fear of judgment. But the shoebox in the closet reminded me that the storm wasn't entirely gone. It had only been contained, its letters whispering from behind cardboard walls. And deep down, I knew Marlene wasn't finished with us. The question wasn't if she'd try to return. It was how.
6 months passed faster than I thought they would. In that time, Sophie went from a fragile newborn to a squirming, giggling little girl who reached for toys and recognized our faces with gummy smiles. Our nights were still sleepless, our days a blur of feedings and diaper changes, but the house finally felt like ours, free, whole. Marlene's letters slowed toward the end of her sentence. At first, they came every week. Long, aching pages of apologies tangled with excuses. Then they arrived every 2 weeks, then once a month. The last one was only a postcard. "See you soon." The sight of it made my stomach knot. "She won't come here," Noah said when I showed him. His voice was firm, but the muscle in his jaw betrayed his doubt. "There's a restraining order. She knows the consequences." But I knew Marlene well enough to understand that consequences were only speed bumps to her, not barriers. The day she was released, the air outside felt heavier, though maybe that was just my imagination. Sophie was 6 months old, babbling sounds that almost formed words, tugging at strands of my hair as I held her on my hip. Noah came home early that afternoon, his face drawn but determined. "We need to be ready, just in case." We didn't have to wait long. At dusk, there was a knock at the door. Not timid, not hesitant, sharp, rhythmic, as if the knocker believed they had every right to be there. I froze. Sophie's warm little body pressed against mine. Noah moved quickly, checking the peephole. His whole body stiffened. "It's her," he whispered. My heart thundered in my ears. "What do we do?" He didn't hesitate. "We don't open the door." Marlene's voice rang out, muffled but clear. "Noah, it's me. Open the door. I just want to see my granddaughter." Sophie stirred, sensing the tension. I rubbed her back, whispering soft nonsense to keep her calm. Noah stood firm, his hand flat against the door. "You're violating the order, Mom. You need to leave." Her tone shifted, softening, dripping with practiced sorrow. "I've changed. Jail gave me perspective. I'm better now. Please, just a few minutes with Sophie. That's all I want." I closed my eyes, remembering the shoebox of letters, the contradictions, the justifications dressed as apologies. "She hasn't changed," I whispered. Noah raised his voice, steady and unshakable. "Go, Mom, before I call the police." There was silence. Then the sound of her palm slapping against the door. Once, twice. "You're choosing her over me after everything I did for you. I'm choosing my family, the one I built, the one you tried to destroy." Another silence. Heavier this time, then footsteps, retreating down the walkway, a car door slamming, the engine fading into the night. Noah sagged against the door, running a hand through his hair. "She'll be back," he said quietly. "This isn't over." I shifted Sophie in my arms, her tiny head tucked under my chin. "Then we'll be ready," I said. Over the next few weeks, Marlene tried everything. First came the phone calls. Numbers we didn't recognize until her voice crackled through the line. We blocked them. Then came the letters again, hand-delivered this time, folded into our mailbox without a stamp. Each one teetered between apology and accusation. "I only wanted the best for you. Laya poisoned you against me. Sophie needs her grandmother." Noah kept them in a folder marked evidence. The final attempt came one Saturday afternoon. We were in the backyard, Sophie on a blanket kicking at a set of colorful rings, when we heard the gate creak open. Marlene stood there, clutching a stuffed bear, her face pale but determined. "Please," she said, her voice trembling, "just let me hold her once." Noah was on his feet in an instant, blocking her path. His voice was calm, but his body was taut as wire. "You need to leave right now." She looked past him, her eyes locking on me. "Laya, you don't understand. I love her. I love her more than you could know." Something inside me snapped, not from fear, but from fire. "You love control, and you lost it. That's not love. That's abuse. Stay away from my daughter." Her face crumpled, but there was no victory in it, only the hollow collapse of someone realizing
The power they once held was gone forever. Noah pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the police." For the first time, Marlene faltered. She dropped the stuffed bear onto the grass and stumbled back through the gate, muttering words we couldn't hear. The police came, took our statements, and promised to reinforce the restraining order. The bear stayed on the lawn for days, until the rain soaked it and the stuffing showed through the seams. I finally threw it away, my hands shaking, but my heart steady. That night, as Sophie slept between us, Noah whispered, "Do you think she'll ever stop?" I stared at the ceiling, listening to the baby monitor's steady hum. Maybe, maybe not. But she'll never win again. Not while we stand together. And for the first time, I believed it completely. The weeks after Marlene's last attempt felt like the aftermath of a storm. Quiet, but not the kind of quiet that comes from peace. It was the hush of a world rebuilding, every creak of the house reminding us of what had been shaken loose. We didn't speak her name often, not because we were pretending she didn't exist, but because she no longer defined our days. The police followed up, reinforcing the restraining order, reminding her of the consequences. The folder Noah kept, thick with letters and reports, became less a weight and more a shield. We had proof, we had boundaries, and for the first time, we had power. Sophie grew in the sunlight of that new reality. She learned to roll, then to crawl, her laughter spilling through the rooms Marlene had once haunted. I'd catch Noah lying on the rug, holding a toy just out of reach, grinning as Sophie stretched her tiny arms. "Come on, little historian," he'd coax. "You can do it." And she always did, because that's what children do. They move forward. At night, when Sophie was finally asleep and the world shrank to just us, Noah would sit with me on the porch, the mountain's dark silhouettes against the horizon. "Do you think she'll ever change?" he asked one evening, his voice soft. "Maybe, but that's not our responsibility anymore. We gave her chances. She chose control. We chose each other." He nodded, slipping his arm around me. "And Sophie will grow up knowing love, not fear." It wasn't always that simple. There were days the past caught me off guard. The sound of a closed door, the scrape of a sponge against tile, even the sight of Sophie's tiny hands gripping the crib rails. Trauma has a way of hiding in corners, waiting for the quiet to return so it can whisper. But each time, Noah was there. Each time, Sophie's giggle pulled me back. Months passed. Seasons turned the mountains from green to gold to white. Our home began to look less like a house we were defending and more like a life we were building. The nursery filled with books and stuffed animals, the fridge crowded with drawings and schedules. The walls hung with photos of Sophie's firsts, her first smile, her first crawl, the first time she clapped her hands to music. One afternoon, I opened the closet and saw the shoebox of Marlene's letters, still sitting on the shelf. I pulled it down, weighed it in my hands, and carried it outside. Noah followed, silent but watchful. I set the box in the metal fire pit and struck a match. The flame caught quickly, curling the paper, turning words into smoke. Apologies, accusations, excuses. All of it burned, lifting into the sky until there was nothing left but ash. I turned to Noah, my hands trembling, and he wrapped me in his arms. "It's over," he whispered. For the first time, I believed it. We didn't know what the future would hold. Maybe Marlene would try again. Maybe she wouldn't. But it no longer mattered. We had chosen each other, chosen Sophie, chosen to build something stronger than control could ever destroy. And in the end, that was the only legacy worth leaving. Because love, real love, isn't about power or rules or perfection. It's about standing together when the storm hits. It's about holding the door open, not closing it. It's about building a family brick by brick with trust and tenderness. And as Sophie giggled in her crib, reaching for the stars painted on her walls, I knew we'd built exactly that. A house of our own. A family that no one, not even Marlene, could take away. And that's how I turned the darkest chapter of my life into a story of strength, justice, and hope. My mother-in-law thought she could control me, but she underestimated a mother's love. To everyone out there fighting silent battles, remember, your voice matters. Your pain matters, and you are stronger than you think. If this story touched you, hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need courage today. Together, we turn pain into power and silence into strength.